Hey, this is Sam Black, and this is the deck that I'm going to be playing today. It is the Great Aurora ramp deck. Before the Pro Tour, my friend Dustin Stern messaged me with an idea he was working on that used Demonic Pact, a bunch of ramp spells, Dark Petition, and the Great Aurora to just try to get a bunch of lands into play and generate cards with Demonic Pact, and then before it kills you, shuffle it in with the Great Aurora so that you can do it all again. Aside from the Great Aurora being very slow, the deck didn't have a lot of ability to actually close against people who wouldn't just eventually die to Demonic Pact. But I turned him on to the Seasons Past loop, and that was a significant boon for the deck. And then he's been working on it for a while since, and eventually added Tireless Tracker, which is a card that works really well with the Great Aurora because Tireless Tracker in a ramp deck has a tendency to just generate a huge number of clues that just sit around waiting for you to have time to sacrifice them. But those clues are permanents for the Great Aurora. And so when they get shuffled into your deck, you draw additional cards for them, even though they themselves are not cards. And the deck got a lot better after that edition. And so since I've been playing with other Tireless Tracker ramp decks and really liking them, I thought that I would try this deck that's kind of a hybrid of the Green-Black Seasons Past control deck, Tireless Tracker ramp, and the Great Aurora decks that Dustin has been working on. So that's kind of how this deck came about and what's going on with it. Now let's just run through the details real quick. As for the lands, it's just lands that tap for green and black mana and a single mirror pool that is for the Ulvenwald Hydra that we'll get to later. 1 Duress and 2 Jotty Offshoots are the 1-drops. Jotty Offshoot is a card that we've seen periodically in ramp. It is good for buying time, which this deck can make great use of. And it's nice to just have some 1-cost cards in your deck just to maximize what you can do with Seasons Past. 2, we have Ultimate Price and Grasp of Darkness, 1 Den Protector, and 3 Sylvan Advocates. Den Protector is just a good card, but it's also very important in case your Seasons Past gets countered to be able to reset the loop. Sylvan Advocate helps give this deck some board presence, which lets it buy more time, and also lets it close. And we have 1 Ruinous Path. The 1 Ruinous Path in this deck is incredibly important and ends up getting cast a lot of times. It's something that you'll often tutor for with Dark Petition and then loop with Seasons Past, because it's just the answer to everything. Might be the single most important card in the deck. 1 Nissa Vastwood Seer. This is just a nice thing to be able to do later on, to always get back a Planeswalker that you can easily threaten to have going. It also just generates some value in the mid-game. 3 Nissa's Pilgrimage. It would like to be 4, but because the deck has to play so many black sources to be able to reliably cast things, all these double black cards, there are only so many forests, and running out of forests to find is a real problem. That said, it's very worth accommodating Nissa's Pilgrimage, because if you ever can get 3 forests with it, that's great for the Great Aurora, as despite the extra forests being stuck in your hand, there are still cards that get shuffled back into your deck and then give you new cards. 4 tireless trackers. I already talked about this, but it's basically rapidly approaching my favorite card. It just does everything. It generates so much value. It's definitely the engine for this deck at this point. 3 explosive vegetation, very similar situation in Innis's Pilgrimage. 1 languish. This, like the Ruinous Path, plays like a lot more than 1 because of the ability to tutor for it with Dark Petition and loop it with Seasons Past. 1 Kalidas, Trader of Get. This actually is a recent addition, but very typical of this kind of deck, and just another really impressive card in general. 3 Dark Petition. This is kind of what this deck is doing, just ramping up to Dark Petition and then casting sweet things with it and getting it back. 1 Ob Nixilis Reignited, very similar situation to Nissa, just gives you extra removal and lets your loop eventually get to the point where you're keeping Planeswalkers in play and easily pulling way ahead. Ulvenwald Hydra functions almost like a Planeswalker. It's a creature that generates value when you get it. Your opponent has to kill it, and then you can just get it back with Seasons Past and threaten it again. And it ends the game very quickly, and it stabilizes a lot of boards because of reach and the fact that it's just bigger than every other creature. Seasons Past, another linchpin of the deck. Nissa's Renewal. This is kind of a bad Ulvenwald Hydra, honestly, but gain 7 life is very important, and it does help suddenly ramp to the point where you can cast the Great Aurora or Ulamog. Worldbreaker functions a lot like Ulvenwald Hydra, but where this puts you up, this sets them back, as well as giving you answers to problematic permanents. Ulamog is really the same thing but bigger, and then a couple copies of the Great Aurora. This is a reset button for if things are somehow getting really bad on the board, but more often than not, it's just a way to really put the game away when you turn your extra lands and clues into lands and business in a good distribution. This is a weird card, but I think it's actually pretty impressive in this shell. The sideboard also has a lot of different cards, as is kind of the nature of being a Dark Petition deck. So we have 2 Deadweights. They are great whenever they're on, because getting a 1-mana removal spell to return is huge, and it's just much easier to not fall behind when you have that in your deck. 1 Transgress the Mind for other control decks and ramp decks. This is part of a larger discard suite with Pick the Brain and 2 Infinite Obliterations, complementing, of course, the 1 Duress in the main. Helps disrupt other people who are doing stuff like this. Also helps resolve your important spells against decks with counter spells. Ultimate Price. This joins the one in the main deck. It's just the best removal spell in the format against people where you want more removal spells. It's very valuable to have. Pick the Brain. I talked about. To the Slaughter. This is the best answer available to Westvale Abbey outside of Ulvenwald Hydra and Ulamog and the Great Aurora and Clipwings. Between all of those, we're really pretty well positioned to deal with it, but this is also good against people who just don't have any small creatures to sacrifice, and sometimes can answer a Planeswalker. Definitely one of the slots I'm less attached to. Can also answer Ulamog, which has come up. Virulent Plague is great right now. Very important card to be able to tutor for. another Kalidas, because there are a reasonable number of matches where it's basically the best thing. A couple more Languishes for all the aggro decks. One Caustic Caterpillar. This is for potentially Cryptolithrites decks and decks with Goggles and Hedron Archive, or any other weird enchantment-based decks, like if anyone's playing Sphinx's Tutelage or Demonic Pact. And then a couple of Clipwings for any of the various angels and dragons in the format, basically. So that is the deck that I'll be playing with, and I'm looking forward to it because it does a lot of fun and sweet things.